Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. I'm Tom Keene, along with Paul Sweeney. Join us each day for insight from the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is well-timed. We are really going to digress from debate chit-chat, economics, finance, and you know what, folks? We're just going to concentrate on yen and on intervention this week. And Daragh Maher is hugely qualified with the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, HSBC, and he joins us in studio. Is there a convenient time to do a unilateral intervention, like does Sunday, our time, 6, 7 p.m. work, Monday morning, Japan time?
It's certainly on the list of possibilities. I suspect Friday afternoon is a good one in New York time as well.
Friday, New York time.
Yeah, it's thinner liquidity, you get bigger bang for your buck.
Paul's on the C streak to on the deck in Atlanta Highlands. Lisa's going to Costco. Let's intervene. Is that how it works?
I think that'll be exactly what Japan's MOF has in mind. They'll be thinking about Costco. Look, it's thin liquidity, and actually, I guess, look, the way we have to think about it is the other way around. Under what conditions might the spot market be racing higher that will give the MOF cover to come in? Because at the moment, what we have higher is dollar yen grinding higher. That isn't a trigger.
You went to one of the toughest schools out there, UC Dublin, okay? And they taught you intervention. Where in your literature does it say unilateral intervention works? I've never found it.
I've never found it, and I was taught by tough Catholic priests, so there was harsh lessons there. I would say it's working, so I'm going to push back on that. I would say it's working because what we have to think about is a counterfactual. Had there not been all this chatter about possible intervention, the actual intervention, where would dollar yen be trading right now? I mean, I think it's safe to say a whole lot higher.
Okay.
So, it depends how you define success. And, this has been a market where it's very hard to find people who will kind of play the downside dollar yen trade. They might talk about it, we do in our forecast 3 months, 6 months, and we all end up snow plowing it further into the future as dollar yen just keeps grinding higher. And I think that's what the MOF and and the BOJ on their behalf are going to have to step in potentially to try and reintroduce meaningful two-way risk there.
Is there a bear case for the US dollar anywhere?
It's a narrow path to a weaker dollar. You kind of need that global Goldilocks scenario of falling inflation and growth recovering. And you get patches of it, and we've had them a couple of months ago in Europe, and then you get another soft patch in Europe as we've had over the last couple of weeks. And at the end of the day, the US economy, I know this morning we've had a small revision, but final domestic demand's still strong. Atlanta Fed, GDP now punching along at 3% for the second quarter. It's the US exceptionalism. The joke I make is Goldilocks has an American accent. And, and I think that's true. And so long as that remains true, it's hard to be, I think, a pervasive seller of the dollar.
All right, we've got some political issues in France, in the UK. How does that impact the euro, the pound sterling?
It certainly impacted euro. I mean, you can see that in terms of the relationship with the euro and the French spreads over German bonds. That's been quite evident. I think we've reached kind of a holding point, ahead of the first round of the elections in France. The markets want to see how that plays out, how many of Macron's candidates make it through the second round. So I think we're kind of in a holding pattern there. UK, I don't think sterling cares.
Okay.
I really don't think sterling cares, which is my sales team back in the trading floor now will all be wincing because I've kind of killed a whole trade for them and a reason to call clients. But I think that's the reality at the moment.
I'm looking at the cacophony of like 1992 out to 1998 as well. Something totally obscure as Sing dollar, Singapore dollar versus the Japanese yen soap opera. Off the pandemic, I have a roughly 60% depreciation of the Japanese yen versus a vibrant Singapore. And even if I go center tendency back 3 decades, I'm still talking a massive depreciation. How many Toyotas are they buying in Singapore?
Well, apparently not that many. Japanese exports are not exactly surging at the moment. Well, I don't. Oh, I can give you one reason. I lived in Singapore in the mid '90s, and they add a lot of money to what it costs to import a car into Singapore. So maybe there's different things going on there. It's a weird thing. You are seeing a compression of import demand in Japan, which is to be expected. You are seeing tourists visiting Japan because it is a super place in relative terms to
Angelina Rascori said yesterday Chinese are going to Japan to shop.
Yeah, and you can see why. The difficulty is you are still trying to export into a weak global economy. So it's fine saying we're price competitive and we're cheaper now than we were back in the 90s or even 6 months ago. But if demand isn't there in the quantum you need, then perhaps you can't capitalize.
And the arch question, which goes to HSBC's wheelhouse with huge heritage here, is there inflation, their overt inflation experiment? A, is it done? And B, does it fail as they go back to disinflation and painful deflation?
It doesn't feel that way. It feels as though they have kind of broken the cycle of deflation expectations within Japan, and that's the key. And also, I think what's happening on the wages front in Japan will give the BOJ some degree of comfort that they might have begun to create a virtuous circle between wages and sustaining those inflation expectations. So, look, I think we've moved a long way from a really persistent deflation mindset in Japan. But, at the end of the day, it's been helped a lot by this weak currency. Yeah. It adds to Japanese prices, it adds to the perception of inflation for everything that you're importing. So the job's not done. But look, it's amazing that we're talking about Japan raising rates when the rest of G10 is cutting rates. I mean, how many times have we had that conversation? It's really weird.
Daragh Maher, thank you so much. He's with HSBC. Dana Peterson.
Yeah.
The last time she was on, she was just lights out on the American consumer. Dana, it's unfair with the data coming out, but what is your model of Q2 GDP right now? We had someone on earlier modeling a sprightly 2.3%. Do you agree?
Well, we actually have GDP growth probably between 0 and 1% annualized in the second quarter. Now, we could revise that up a little bit. It really depends on what we see tomorrow with the personal income and spending data, but consumers are pulling back, and it's a reflection of the fact that excess savings are gone, real incomes are below real spending, and people are levering up and paying a lot of interest on their debt.
Yeah, and Paul, this is what surveillance is about. We like the difference of opinions. We don't have an opinion, but we're going to listen to those more optimistic, and those like Dana Peterson, sub 1%.
Exactly. So Dana, talk to us about the consumer out there. Essentially, the consumer wants a job, he or she has a job, wages are increasing. How do you see the consumer here today?
It's really mixed. Consumers are saying, yes, I'm working. I like that. My finances are okay. The present situation is fine, but they're still complaining about elevated prices.
Yep.
Eggs are $8, bread's 10, and they're also more concerned about the future. Their expectations for the labor market are starting to erode a bit. They're concerned about their incomes. They're also very concerned about business conditions going forward. And we're seeing this tug of war, and it looks like expectations that are weakening are starting to take over a little bit in the numbers.
So where are we going to see that? Are we going to see that where are we going to see weakness in this economy if it does, in fact, accelerate to some degree? Will it be in the labor market? Will we see unemployment kind of inching above 4%?
Oh, we think the unemployment rate could tick up to maybe 4.2%, but that's really low, and that's still a pretty good labor market. Yeah. I think the thing is that consumers, if the Fed sees that consumers are still working, but they pull back on spending, and that helps cool inflation, that's a perfect scenario. It's when people start losing jobs. I think that's when the Fed gets really worried and might accelerate interest rate cuts.
So do you expect this Fed to sit pat here in the upcoming meetings and maybe wait until maybe even December or maybe even later?
Yes, we think the Fed's going to stay put. Certainly inflation is their biggest issue, and it's still sticky. So tomorrow's number, again, will be really important to see if the easing that we saw in CPI shows up in PCE. Yeah. We have the Fed cutting in November and December.
I stand corrected. Dana said eggs at $10.
Oh boy.
And I said, you gotta be kidding me. Dana Peterson, of course, nailing it on the research side. The basic whole paycheck eggs are $4.19. And then you work yourself up $6, $7, $8. I don't know. The ones I buy are $7.29. And there is a dozen eggs for $9.99. Dana Peterson
nailed it.
Nails it.
Who cares about the GDP call?
Exactly. Dana, are we substituting? Am I looking at $9.99 eggs and saying, oh no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to buy the $7.29 eggs?
Yes, people are definitely trading down. They're buying the store brands. And so we're seeing that with goods and big ticket items. They're not purchasing like cars. And if they are buying a car, they're buying a used one, not a new one. But also with services, they're saying, I'm not going to go to the movies. I will stay at home and stream. And if I do pay for services, it's going to be my health insurance and it's also going to be my car insurance.
So the expectations for inflation, I know that's important for the Federal Reserve. What does your data show about consumers' expectations for inflation?
Well, the good news is that our one-year inflation expectations gauge continues to tick downward.
Okay.
It was very elevated a couple of years ago. It's much better now. Even though consumers are complaining now, they're saying, well, we hope things will be better in the future and that our wallets will be happy about that.
All right. So at the end of the day here, I mean, this Federal Reserve probably going to ease. Is that going to be enough for this U.S. economy? Does this U.S. economy need more rate cuts faster? Or do you think this economy can kind of hang in there and that soft landing can continue?
I think the economy can hang in there. Again, the key is people working. And as long as people have some income coming in and they can still pay for the basics, then that's a good economy. People may not feel that way because people like to have excess and they like to be able to spend. But from the Fed's point of view, a healthy labor market is important, but more importantly, they need to get inflation down because everyone feels inflation.
Lisa Mateo, can you get eggs at Costco? Can you go there and buy?
That's the only place you want to get them.
Okay,
really?
What's a dozen eggs cost at Costco?
No, you don't get a dozen. You get the 2 dozen, like the double whammy pack.
The double whammy pack?
Yes.
So Dana Peterson, is that where we're going to a double whammy pack consumption in America? Because people are totally strapped. I mean, we are.
Yes, that's definitely what we're seeing in the data and what we're hearing from the write-ins from consumers. But again, the economy probably was a little bit overheated last year. And the thing is that we're seeing this cooling, and that's necessary for inflation to get lower. But again, there are key elements of inflation that the Fed is kind of losing the war on. Certainly when it comes to insurance costs and even wages. And that's a reflection of tightness in the labor market and labor shortages, and that's feeding through to inflation.
Dana, you got to talk to Lisa Mateo, as you do your wonderful research for the Conference Board. Joining us now, the only person I want to talk to on this day, Wendy Schiller, is definitive, whatever your politics at Brown University, on all that we're observing here. Wendy, I'm just going to frame the ages for you. Nixon and JFK were something like 42, 43, and 47 at the 1960 debate. I went back and I looked, and Woodrow Wilson, with a deceased wife in the White House, would have been something like 63, 64 at a debate if it had happened in 1916. And tonight we have a 78-year-old and an 81-year-old debating. This is just flat out historic. How do you frame the age issue around what we will see tonight at 9 p.m.?
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing for all of America to watch. I mean, on the one hand, you can feel pretty happy about life expectancy in America and functionality. I mean, 40 years ago, Ronald Reagan was, pretty old by most standards when he assumed the presidency. So it's not as if we haven't seen this before. And if you think, well, we're in better shape than we were 40 years ago, why not somebody in their mid 70s? But we're not even in the mid 70s. We're at, 78 and 81. So I think, it's up there. And I'm curious, at 9 o'clock at night for 90 minutes, who could function well under those circumstances, whether you're in your 40s or your 70s. That's going to be the interesting thing. But we know these candidates, and we know their frailties and their flaws, and we know their strengths. You've got to figure Trump will look more energetic and more vibrant because that's just the way he rolls. And Biden's going to have to do everything he can, I think, to keep up with that kind of energy.
Wendy, who do you think has more to lose tonight?
Paul, I definitely think President Biden has more to lose tonight. We have seen these polls tighten. Let's go back to January, December. Even in swing states now, Trump's ahead, but by less. And, the national polls, there's 3 major national polls this week. They all have them within the statistical margin of error. They're all tied, essentially. So the person who has the most to lose is the incumbent president, who's been catching up slowly but surely to Donald Trump. And sort of people are saying, well, maybe Biden won't be that bad. Maybe he's in better shape than we think. But if he stumbles badly tonight, I think that's going to bring those levels of concern about his age back into the mix, and I think it could cost him.
Wendy, what do you think about the debate parameters here tonight in terms of no audience, muting the other candidates' mic? What's that all about?
Actually, Paul, to my previous point, I think muting the mic helps Biden more than it helps Trump, because Trump's off-the-cuff remarks really, his audience loves that. In other words, his base loves that. Most Democrats cringe when Biden goes off remarks, off script. So those sort of mic'd comments, I think, by Biden could get him in more trouble than Trump. So this is a good thing for Biden. The studio audience, I think, is a shame. I mean, it's America. We have elections, regularly scheduled, constitutionally mandated elections. And part of that process is audience input, voter input. So it's unfortunate that the audience won't be allowed to be in the studio with the candidates.
What is your guess, Professor Schiller, of the topic that will cause both candidates to pause?
Well, I think Biden is going to the strategy has got to be make Trump lose it. In a way that, Trump can lose it, but really lose it and really scare those independents who have stayed away from Trump and Trump-backed candidates. We've even seen that this week in Republican primaries. Trump-backed candidates did not do so well in their House races. So really scare people about the prospect of Donald Trump, and Trump has to get Biden to stumble. The border, I think it's really going, even though things are better at the border since the executive order a couple of weeks ago, but still, Trump's got to get under Biden's skin, and vice versa.
My guess is a complete amateur. I defer to David Gurge on Matthew Cayley lines. The whole border thing is going to be a tinderbox.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Wendy, why are we having this debate so early in the campaign cycle season?
I think it was a moment of opportunity for each candidate before the conventions to go into the summer with some momentum, right? As we just said, they're tied, right? Biden has slow momentum catching up to Trump, but they're tied. So this could be breakout, right? Trump seems more reasonable, let's say tonight, and independents come back to him. Biden seems stronger, more vibrant than people thought. Then he gets the momentum swing going before the conventions, not after. And I think that is a big thing for both candidates.
And now we segue for one final question with Wendy Schiller. We can do this, folks. Lisa Mateo, Wendy, featured a Wall Street Journal article on the rise of Hispanic America. What will be the impact of Hispanic America on November 5th?
Well, Lisa, that's a great thing to look at. We have this conversation every 4 years, at least for the last decade, how the Latino vote, Hispanic vote will make the difference. 48% turnout of registered Hispanic votes stays pretty much the same in the last 3 presidential cycles. I'm not thinking that's changing much, except if Trump, let's say, picks Marco Rubio, who's of Cuban descent. Latinos are not monolithic. Doesn't mean every Latino will vote for Trump and Rubio, but it certainly is a very significant sign by the Republican Party. They're going after Latino votes in a much stronger way than ever before. So maybe we see a difference, but we have not seen the kind of surge in turnout in the last 3 presidential elections.
Lisa, what do you got?
Yeah, Wendy, the age of the Hispanic population, they also skew younger. How is that going to be in relation to how they react to it? Are they looking for that younger voter?
Yeah, Lisa, that's a really great point, because especially in the last 10 to 15 years, those younger voters now can vote, right? So we've always had a youngish population, but now we've got younger voters. And the question is things like abortion, reproductive services. Latinos tend to be more Catholic, tend to be more conservative on abortion and other social issues. However, younger Latinos in some segments of the Latino population are strong supporters of the right to abortion. So that's going to be a big issue. And that's where Biden can get Trump. Can he get Trump to commit to not enforcing a ban? In other words, not denying contraception. Can he get him on the record? And can he go after abortion and the Republicans? That's going to be a big thing for even young Latino voters.
Wendy Schiller, thrilled. We'd be honored to have you on tomorrow if we can figure out your schedule. Wendy Schiller at Brown University, her civics textbooks her civics textbooks are definitive. The Lisa Mateo Show, the front pages. Lisa, what do you have?
Okay, the latest Census Bureau stats came out, so I want to point out something, the growing number of Hispanics. This is what stood out to the Wall Street Journal. They have this great breakdown of it. U.S. Hispanic population grew by 1.16 million to more than 65 million in the recently estimated year. So that accounts for about 70% of overall population growth in that period. Now, about 1/3 of that gain, it was due to migrants entering the U.S. The rest came from Hispanic births outnumbering deaths. But what stands out is that growth helped offset the shrinking non-Hispanic population, especially in places like Philadelphia, Milwaukee was another one, Salt Lake City, Louisville, Kentucky, several counties in Florida. And the breakdown, the biggest part of that was Mexicans, and then the Venezuelan population is growing the fastest.
Yeah, that was a terrific article, and it really harkens to changes. I remember pushing 20 years ago, somebody said 2045 is a tip point demographically for America. I think it's pulled in, and you're going to hear it in tonight's debate.
I'll tell you what, about 30 years ago, I was part of a group that took Univision television public here in the United States. The demographics you just mentioned were the exact same demographics we talked about 30 years ago.
Really? So
exact same.
Okay.
It's just trends in place. And it's a really, really thorough article. That was by the Journal? Was
yes,
it?
by the Wall Street Journal.
17% of the U.S. population is Hispanic, 18%, something like that. It's,
And it goes right to tonight's debate. Next.
Exactly.
Most definitely. Congestion pricing, have to talk about
They're going to talk about that in the debate tonight.
I don't know if they will, but now the MTA is saying because of halting it, the congestion pricing plan, they're saying it's going to have to cut its capital plan, $16.5 billion in subway upgrades. That's what they're pointing to. How that breaks down, they plan to make subway stations more accessible to riders with disabilities. Now they can't do that. Repairs to infrastructure, that's like a century old. You have the expansion of the 2nd Avenue subway line can be affected, and also other projects as well. So they're saying because this was paused, now you have, where are we going to get the money to do all these things we want to do?
Has anybody seen a body count of how many jobs are lost or how many jobs won't be formed because of this decision? To me, it's a big number. I don't know what the number is.
Yeah, well, yesterday we did that story with that one group saying that about, 100,000 jobs. Yeah.
I don't know. Who knows where those numbers come from? I mean, if you're for the MTA, they've got to figure out a way here to, A, balance the budget, and B, find some capital to continue to put up the maintenance capex, if nothing else.
I don't know. I have no pearls of wisdom here.
I don't know. No.
Other than, folks, when you go up the roads here, when I leave the building like at 5:30, there's those big cameras that John Tucker talks about.
Who's paying for those?
They're
dark.
There.
Yep.
There's no other way to put it. Next.
All right, we talked about Amazon, the $2 trillion market valuation, right? But some new data is showing that more people are watching Amazon Prime Video. Okay, this is an Evercore ISI study. It did it of Amazon users. So Amazon's Prime Video engagement, 80%. 50% polled said they're watching more than before. Sports is helping, a big thing. They said 58% of Prime members watched at least part of that. They had the NFL Thursday night football.
Okay,
But they said why it's important is because it's helping keep people paying the $139 a year for Amazon Prime.
Is that how much Amazon Prime costs?
Yes, it is.
I
Believe
had no
me,
idea.
I know that.
If you'd asked me, I would have said $99.
No, it's like
it's 40% higher than that?
It's crazy. And so because they get the people who want the Prime, they get more people too to buy on Amazon because they're getting competition from places like Temu and all that other kind of stuff. But it also shows that Amazon has this big opportunity, which Paul was talking about, in advertising. So it shows the potential that they have there.
was brilliant yesterday.
Very good. Excellent.
Well, folks, one of the reasons to be part of Bloomberg podcasts is you get to see everything on Bloomberg Radio, including extensive comments from Mr. Weezer about this. My amateur take is Prime Video's got a new spirit. It's got a new energy because they're not apologizing about ads. They just show ads.
Right.
All the rest are tiptoeing around,
right,
as Brian alluded to.
And they have the original movies. I mean, they have a lot of movies that I watch just for Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, after I watch it, I'm like, why did I watch that? But but they do offer the original
And they
movies
really,
there.
and quite frankly, if they ever really wanted to get into this market, i.e. the entertainment market, they could get it in a huge way. I mean, I think Amazon Prime is good. It's fine. And, it's a good streaming service. But if they ever want to really get into it, they could.
Next.
All right, we're talking about pebbling. And if you do this with your children, it's a new trend. If you think about it, this was in Parents Magazine. It's great because pebbling is used.
Cover every month.
What is pebbling?
Pebbling is kind of used to describe a courting, like in a relationship when you're kind of courting someone.
Okay.
It came actually from penguins in Antarctica because they present rocks to each other when they want to court one another. This is the origin of it. But now parents are doing it with their kids. They're courting them with communication. So how they're doing it, if you're having a tough time talking with your kids, they're texting them funny memes. Like they're sending them a link to a song that reminds them.
We call those dad jokes.
Yeah. You can send them dad jokes, okay? You can put up little Post-it notes on the mirror, inspirational quotes. Here's the reason why.
Do you do this at the Mateo house? Can you see her Saturday morning on the way to Costco? She's in the kitchen, screaming in the West Wing, "If you don't empty the dishwasher, I'm going to kill you."
They get those text messages too. Yes, please empty the dishwasher. But it's also about sending, like if they have a game, like good luck, you're going to do great, love you. Like, sending those positive little things to your kids because it actually, experts say, it sends off this little signal to your brain, releases dopamine. Okay, so there's some science behind it.
Is this like in Lisa's new contract? We have to do this garbage. Is that what this is? Is this the sensitive Lisa?
I love it because
Paul, what do you think?
I like the tough Lisa. No junk food in my household. That's the Lisa Mateo I like.
That's the one too. But nowadays, parents have a tough time talking to their kids. So because of technology. So this is one way for them to kind of break the ice so that you become cool again, maybe.
Do you put Post-it notes on their mirrors?
I did like twice, maybe.
Can I just state I can't get to Afterthoughts mirrors because there's so much Sephora investment in between.
That is true.
So do we get this 5 days a week from you?
Yes. You have the pleasure of getting this.
We're going to get this sponsored coming. I'm going to get this sponsored.
I'm telling you, I bet people are talking on the chat about pebbling if they do it with their kids. I'm telling you, it's going to be a big thing.
It's a thing.
I guess, Lisa Mateo, thank you so much for the newspapers. This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, bringing you the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app.